I think with Danny, he's always a bit of a hit or miss for me. Sometimes he does really excellent films, and then he does films which are, well, they were interesting attempts, but not good or great, just interesting. 28 Days is sort of a little bit in between. The so-called fast zombie has been done before. He's not like innovating here, but it's definitely an interesting turn. Now, I myself am more of a fan of the Romero zombies, who are very slow. They do evolve. People kind of think they don't change. They do change slowly in his canon of films, but nevertheless, this is a very interesting and very powerful mixture of science fiction and horror. So, what is the story? Well, essentially, some animal rights activists accidentally unleash a super virus or bad virus that, of course, zombifies a certain part of the British population. And the first two-thirds are the most effective because it seems that all of British society has basically just gone back to the primitive ages, and it's really well done. Now, looking back on it, the cinematography is a little bit all over the place, but nevertheless, in terms of what Danny is trying to show, it is very, very powerful. I really felt it in terms of society just breaking down and there being no rules. And Jim's confusion and distortion at the beginning is very, very believable. However, as the story proceeds, it starts to lose credibility. Nevertheless, for most of it, it is a very powerful piece and very well done and very well acted. We've got quite a stellar cast from Naomi Harris to Gleason to Christopher, who later on did Doctor Who. So it's got quite a set of great performances within it. But finally, when they have to reveal their hand at the end and sort of do some twists, I thought it kind of lost credibility because it just seemed like a little bit too much. I will say Christopher was very frightening and convincing as Major West. He does a very good job. Just when you think that whole military authoritarian who wants to rape women has been done to death, no, he did, I think, a very convincing job. And as always with these authoritarians, he does have a sort of cuckoo logic, but you kind of understand where he's coming from. And also, when certain tragic events, which I'm not going to give away if you've never seen the film, they're very powerful. They hit you very, very hard in terms of when people are lost and when people have to be sacrificed. That was all very well shot, very well acted. So what's the problem? Well, the problem, I think, is that once you endow zombies with speed and intelligence, a lot of questions are going to come to mind. This is also the early 2000s, and for some odd reason, a lot of directors were just really in love with the shaky cam or just playing with the speed of frames. And it's fine. It doesn't age too well, but I find it now very distracting. And it seems to me to try to make up in cheap scares what the plot is lacking. Still, I think Danny, for the most part, is very restrained, and sometimes he does go too far in his other films. Here I thought it was pretty well balanced. So on the whole, this is a very strong film. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I'm teetering on a 7.5 because I do enjoy it a lot. I like going back to it, but again, I just have too many questions in my mind of like, wait, that was mighty convenient that this happened, and then that happened, and then this happened. And Jim's durability is pretty insane. I mean, just given what he goes through, you think, wow, he should be losing a few limbs or just be really paralyzed by the end. But it's like, nope, he's ready to get back up. So, and I mean, again, it is very believable in how Selena and him bond together as well as the other characters we meet. But still, it is kind of a more mythic kind of fantasy film, which is why I'm doing it here. But I do appreciate Romero's much more documentary approach, which, again, does indulge in fantasy and myth, but I think is much more epic and much more believable and much more powerful. So, even within the genre of the zombie films, I do see why this is a kind of fan favorite and people go back to it. Shaun of the Dead overshadowed it in too many other ways, unfortunately, because it's a much more funny and much more creative and a much more fun film than this. But there you go. You play the zombie game. You have to be willing to take a few lumps. But overall, a very strong film. I do highly recommend it. And now being so old, it should be very easy and cheap to rent or look at. If this is like your second or third viewing, it's still worth going through because I do think there is a lot there in terms of the basic premise. I will say, however, it's not just that it's not innovative. Apparently, it is stealing an old concept from classical British science fiction. So, again, I think Alex is a very talented writer, but he is very derivative. And he's not much of an innovator. He just basically likes to, go back to old sources and kind of modernize them, which I think within limits is fine. But a lot of people who are very big admirers should just know this is actually taken from some other stories. So don't be too pumped up on it, saying, "Wow, he really innovated stuff. It's a revolutionary, groundbreaking new." No, it's not. No, it's not. It's if you do know the science fiction and fantasy world, you realize this has kind of been done before. But still, even if it's very derivative, it's still very well done. It's nothing wrong with something being predictable if it's well done. I just wish the ending was a little bit more. I wish they just stretched themselves a little bit more, but still, overall, a very strong film and well worth remembering. A minor classic, but still a classic. Alright, 28 Days Later, highly recommended. Thank you for listening.